Welcome back to Starter Pack. Okay, after 25 years in software development, I've seen every project management framework you can imagine. But let's talk about Scrum, because that framework seems to somehow convince everyone that the eternal sprinting is sustainable. You know what happens when you sprint forever? You collapse. Let me tell you some real stories about why Scrum fails and what actually will work and why I can't stand Scrum. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Startup Pack. I'm Spencer Thompson. Here at Startup Pack, we love to train software developers in our licensed coding boot camps, as well as build custom software solutions for companies. With a decade of executive leadership as a fractional CTO and 25 years in software development, I've mastered transforming tech teams and products. All right, so let's talk about Scrum, because you know that thing that everybody swears by, but actually secretly 99% of people hate, and only those 1% of Scrum zealots out there loves? Yeah, that one, Scrum. So today I'm going to break down some of the classic ways that Scrum fails. And trust me, it's not just about bad stand-ups. And if you think I'm talking about comedy, then it is kind of comical, because Scrum is actually comical that people think it actually works, but it doesn't. And let me tell you about why I can get in with some real world stories and real world situations where we can talk about together, talk about why Scrum doesn't work. So let me tell you a story about, we'll call the company TechFlow Solutions, right? It's a mid-sized software company that decided to go all in on Scrum last year, right? Now you've seen these people, right? They have about 50 developers. They're split up into about 6 teams, and management was convinced that Scrum would double their productivity and make them more predictable, right? Spoiler alert, nowhere close on any of it. So it started with a flagship product, right? A payment processing system that handled millions of transactions per day. The CEO had just returned from a tech conference where someone convinced him that Scrum was going to be the silver bullet for all their development problems. You know how this story goes, right? They hired a certified Scrum Master fresh out of 2-day certification course, or even 2-year certification course. I don't really remember or care. But they immediately started implementing the textbook Scrum, right? Because if you're not, one of the first things that I love about Scrum is that if Scrum fails, it means you didn't do it right, because it always works. It's flawless, right? So there's one of the first red flags, right? They use the exact same sprint lengths and process for every team, regardless of what they were building. The infrastructure team working on database optimizations had the same 2-week sprint as the front-end team building the new customer portal. Now, the breaking point came during their biggest project of the year, a major system upgrade which absolutely had to be done before Black Friday. Now, the team estimated it would take about 3 months. Management looked at their velocity, right, from previous sprints and decided it should only take about 6 weeks, because they took the story point, looked at the velocity and said, oh, well, we did the math. This is only going to take about 6 weeks, even though the team had estimated that this effort would take 3 months. So now here's where it gets really good, is right. During sprint planning, the senior developer said they needed to refactor the payment processing engine, a critical 8-point story, right? Now the product owner, who was pressured by management timelines, broke it down into 3 3-point stories, because, you know, that's pretty close. Like 9 is pretty close to 8, right? Arguing that smaller stories means faster delivery, right? You ever heard that one in Scrum before? Anyone who's worked in software knows that that is not how technical debt work, and this is not, an 8-point story does not equate to 3 3-point stories. The daily stand-up became an absolute theater of absurdity, right? Developers would say that they were still working on the payment integration for days, afraid to admit that they had discovered new edge cases that would blow up their estimates. The Scrum board looked perfect, right? Stories moving smoothly across the columns, but the reality is they were moving subtasks around to show progress while the actual problem continued to grow larger. Now, the retrospective was a special kind of torture, because every sprint, the team would raise the same issue: technical debt, unrealistic deadlines, edge cases, and the need for a proper system architecture or re-imaging of this architecture, right? Now, the Scrum Master would diligently write down everything on sticky notes and have fun little games and make out of it, but management would only focus on the one metric: the velocity wasn't increasing. So by sprint 5, they had a beautifully groomed backlog, detailed burn down charts, and a system that would crash processing if you process more than 10 payments per second. The front-end team had built a gorgeous UI that couldn't handle the back-end's increasing latency, and the infrastructure team was drowning in emergency patches. 2 weeks before Black Friday, the CTO finally took the technical details inside of the sprint metrics. What he found wasn't pretty. The payment engine refactor hadn't actually fixed the core issue. It'd just been split up into smaller stories so that they could ship it faster, but nobody could see the big picture anymore. So the project ultimately launched 3 months late, way over budget and way more technical debt than they had originally started with. The sprint velocity and burn down charts looked great on paper, but they'd maintained a consistent 40 points every sprint. But never mind that they'd actually quietly redefined what a point meant every single week. So the epilogue is they switched to Kanban 4 months later. Same team, freed up from artificial sprint boundaries, delivered more quality code in the next quarter than they had the previous 6 months of sprinting. Now, the ironic part was when they finally succeeded, it wasn't because they found the perfect process, it's because they finally started listening to their developers and adapting their approach to what teams actually needed. And that's where Scrum fails. It doesn't. Scrum comes from the top down. It's pushed down from product managers and from executives. Sometimes the best process is the one that gets out of the way and lets engineers develop and innovate. So I keep this story in my back pocket whenever someone tells me that Scrum will solve all their development problems, and I just laugh. As always, I say that 25 years in the industry, no process will save you if you're not willing to face reality and trust your developers. Now, as with everything, if your company is struggling to get stuff worked out and you've got systems that aren't connected, reach out to us, because here at Startup Hack, we love to train software developers as well as to build custom software solutions for companies. We love to help you come in, and I can help you with my enterprise architects as well as my developers. We can stand up a team, or we can just give you some estimates and also help you dive into some technical details. So reach out to us at startuphack.com/Spencer, because we'd love to help. All right, let's go into the next story, because I got two good stories for you, right? So picture this. This one's a more mid-sized tech company. Let's call it Innotech, right? Because they decided to go agile. Again, they hire a Scrum Master, train the team, get a good, high, expensive Scrum coach, and they roll out Scrum like it's going to be the next big thing. Everybody's excited. Everybody's optimistic. Then everything goes sideways, right? The team kicks off their first sprint with some lofty goals. 2 weeks in, at the end of their sprint, they realize they've overcommitted badly. So instead of just adjusting, the Scrum Master insists that they push through. The team starts working nights and weekends, burnout sets in, the sprint keeps going, but by the end, they've delivered half of what they promised, and morale is in the gutter. So remember, if you're always sprinting, it's not a sprint, it's a jog. And this team was running a marathon with no finish line. I want you to think about a marathon runner and how long they can actually sprint, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about the story point debacle, right? The team starts estimating story points for the next sprint. One developer thinks it's a 1, another thinks it's a 5. They spend an entire meeting arguing about whether it's a 1 or it's a 5. The Scrum Master steps in and says, look, we're just going to meet in the middle and call this a 3. No one's happy when they move on a 3. Fast forward to the sprint, the 3 turns out to actually be a 13, because actually the guy who knew the 5 knew the code base well enough and actually was trying to be optimistic, because everybody else in the room had said 1 or 3. So he didn't want to be the idiot to say 13, but he actually knew it was because he knew the code the best. So this is where I love story point debacles, because I've seen this over and over and over going. Story points is like horoscopes. They're vague, confusing, and ultimately meaningless. But hey, at least horoscopes are fun to read, right? Just like story points. So let's talk about the retrospective from hell, right? The team holds their first retrospective. Everybody's frustrated. No one wants to speak up. Finally, one brave soul says, we're overworked and we're under-delivering. Scrum Master nods, takes a note, and says, well, we'll fix that next sprint. Spoiler alert, you can't fix that next sprint. I tell people all the time, it's like a 6th grade presidential election. Remember those presidential elections from 6th grade in elementary school, where every single president gets up there and says, we're going to have ice cream for every day for lunch and unlimited recesses, right? And can they really deliver that? Absolutely not. So next retrospective, same problems, same promises. Retrospectives are like Groundhog Day, except instead of Bill Murray, you get awkward silences and half-baked solutions. So one developer, let's call him Dave, has had enough, and so he secretly starts to use Kanban for his tasks. His productivity skyrockets, the team notices, and they start to follow his lead. Scrum Master gets furious because this isn't the Scrum way. I am the Scrum zealot. And Dave shrugs and says, hey, but look, this is working. So Kanban is like the cooler older sibling who shows up and fixes everything. Meanwhile, Scrum is the overbearing parent who insists on doing things the Scrum way, right? So next, the Scrum, the great Scrum exit, right? So the team revolts and demands that they ditch Scrum. Management reluctantly agrees. They switch to Kanban and suddenly everything starts to improve. Work gets done, stress levels goes down, team's happy. Now the problem is they've invested so much money into Scrum, and what do they do with the Scrum Master and the Scrum Coach, right? Well, so he quits and starts his own consulting business, right? Because that's what happens, and Inditech lives happily ever after. I've seen this story repeat itself quite a few times. My friend, this is the story of how Scrum fails so hard, and this becomes a really cautionary tale. So if your company is struggling with Scrum or any other type of process, let us help you out. Here at Startup Hack, our specialty is connecting systems and streamlining workflows so your team can work and actually get stuff done. Check out startuphack.com/Spencer because we can help your company work like a well-oiled machine. Now, what do you think? I'd love to hear you tell me why I'm wrong and why Scrum is so amazing and why you love it and why you just want to marry it. But let's be real here. If you go out and take a poll of developers who have used Scrum and actually like it, you're going to find that those who like it are in the maybe 10 to 15%, maybe. And even then, they probably weren't doing Scrum right. So, love to hear your thoughts. Here at Startup Hack, we love to train software developers in our licensed coding boot camps, as well as build custom software solutions for companies. So reach out because we'd love to help. Check out startuphack.com/Spencer today, and we'll hit you up some more next time and hear some other great information.
Want to become a software developer but don't want to spend 4 years in college and rack up massive student loan debts? Think you need technical expertise to get started? Welcome to Startup Hack, a better way to start your software career without student loans and years without income. One-on-one tutoring is included so you never get stuck and have guidance through the whole process. No technical experience is necessary. Learn at your own pace and in your own space. Startup Hack has worked with local state agencies in your area to make it so that qualifying students can get the program costs covered entirely and students can start earning while they learn.
Startup Hack's .NET Coding Bootcamp was a game changer for my career. As someone with no prior programming experience, I was initially intimidated by the idea of learning to code, but the instructors at Startup Hack broke down complex concepts into easy to understand lessons and provided hands-on projects that really cemented my understanding. The curriculum was comprehensive and up to date and got me ready for my first job. What really set Startup Hack apart was the focus on practical, real-world skills. Thanks to Startup Hack, I landed my dream job as a .NET developer within weeks of graduating. I went from knowing nothing about code to building professional-grade web applications in just a few intense months. If you're looking to break into .NET development or level up your coding skills, I cannot recommend Startup Hack enough.
Complete our 3-month coding bootcamp, gain hands-on experience, and land a paid internship. With 2 years of experience on average, our graduates are making over $80,000 per year. The 3-month program includes technologies from Microsoft, Google, and Facebook. No debt, just a quick path to earning. Check out startuphack.com to code your future and start today.